Shalom, dear friends and colleagues. My name is Giulio Lorefici-Gabelli, one of the founders of the One Accord document, president of the Association of Christian Ministries, Vancouver, and the senior pastor of Westwood Community Church in Metro Vancouver. Sadly, today we are continuing to witness the moral erosion of our Canadian culture in all its institutions and in public life. This is the fruit of a strategic opposition to the Judeo-Christian values that have shaped our democracy by left-wing organizations and lobbyist groups. They are determined to eradicate any biblical influence in government and in the public arenas of our nation. There is a growing concern, however, that our government and institutions are increasingly becoming more hostile towards faith communities that embrace values regarding sexuality, transgender issues, or the rights of parents to raise their children with their religious convictions. In fact, they are seeking to incriminate anyone who holds these biblical values by labeling it as hate speech and racism. Clearly, the moral and spiritual landscape of Canada is changing drastically, and our opponents are determined to silence the voice of Bible-believing leaders and Christians in the public arena who do not agree with the morality of inclusivity and a sexually progressive Canada. First of all, I would like to remind you that the preamble to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms states, whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. Section 2 of the Charter, called Fundamental Freedoms, guarantees that every Canadian has the right to the freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of thought, freedom of belief, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom of association. I want to share with you a few examples that clearly indicate that our freedom of speech in Canada is now directly under assault. Recently, a man in Alberta was penalized and fined $55,000 for simply stating that a certain male activist who was dressed as a woman was not a woman but was biologically a man. Secondly, a number of very vocal advocates who speak very openly on the social media platforms about the dangers surrounding the SOGI 123 program and its impact on children were being monitored by militant members of the LGBTQ community. Added to this, their social media accounts were shut down because of the protest of watchdog groups who identify and target anyone who shares views that do not agree with the LGBTQ agenda. Thirdly, a number of parents who have confronted principals and schools regarding their concerns about transgender ideology being taught to their children without consulting parents have been reprimanded and humiliated and labeled as racist and homophobic, and the list sadly goes on. Friends, we are at a crossroads in our nation, and the trends that have been evidenced and established in our nation are alarming and quite concerning. If we remain silent, we will be stripped of our rights as Canadians in the faith community to speak freely our views and values from our pulpits and from our platforms. The 2019 federal election is critical, for it will determine whether there will be a continuation of these trends or a turnaround protecting our freedom of speech and our right to speak freely about our biblical values. Dear friends and colleagues, if we do not engage and speak openly in this critical hour, our silence will imply complicity, willingly or unwillingly, with the Antichrist spirit that is seeking to the very soul of our nation. For this reason, we ask you and encourage you to encourage your congregations to vote and actively engage in supporting candidates that are committed to protecting our freedom of speech. The following video in this series will be presented by one of our team members who will address another issue, the need to protect parental rights in Canada, which is also under attack. May God bless you, and may God bless Canada.